Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. And for the first time in 727 days, we have a new NFL champion. As the Philadelphia Eagles squash the Chiefs' bid for a three-peat, they thump Kansas City 40-22 to win their second Super Bowl in franchise history. It's Kansas City's first loss by more than 2 possessions since October of 2021. Truly pretty unprecedented stuff in this Patrick Mahomes era. The Eagles flying high, having avenged their Super Bowl loss from 2 years ago. And look, there's plenty of room for heroes when you finish a season 17-3, and especially when you wrap up the competitive part of a Super Bowl really in the third quarter. Nick Sirianni got the Gatorade bath with 3 minutes still to go in the game, which I don't know if it's a record. Certainly feels like the earliest I've ever seen the Super Bowl winning head coach get the Gatorade dumped on him. Plenty of room for heroes. Saquon Barkley made NFL history on Sunday night, becoming the first 2,500-yard back in league history, passes Terrell Davis's number for regular season and playoff yardage. Vic Fangio and his defense hassled Patrick Mahomes into arguably the worst day of his NFL career. And then there's Jalen Hurts, who, despite plenty of criticism, came through in another effort on the biggest stage in the game, 17 of 22, 221 yards, rushed for a Super Bowl record, 72 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith both took turns feasting on single coverage. The Eagles finished with 345 yards of offense in a game where they really stopped moving the ball, trying to move the ball at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And at the center of it all was Hurts, who pulled all the strings in a performance that won him Super Bowl MVP. Not to mention Tom Brady's final LFG player of the game.
Every game that I broadcast, I award the LFG player of the game to that one player who makes me say, let's go.
You won't see many better examples of complimentary football, especially in a game this big. Jalen Hurts, Eagles offense coming to life with a lot of help from a Philadelphia defense that came to play, to put it mildly. 5 different Eagles pass rushers charted a pressure rate of 20% or more against Kansas City. 4 guys finished with 4 or more pressures. 2 guys finish with 2+ sacks. That would be Josh Sweat, 2.5 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, had a pressure that led to one of Mahomes' 2 interceptions. Then there was Milton Williams with 2 sacks, one of those being a strip sack. You heard it from Tom and Kevin at the beginning of the show. Cooper DeJean, on his birthday, no less, managed to go unnoticed by Patrick Mahomes, as you heard in the call earlier in the show from Tom and Kevin. Unnoticed by Patrick Mahomes, steps in front of a ill-advised throw, 38-yard pick six. Zach Bond benefiting from the pressure provided by his defense to get the second interception, which really felt like it put this game away with plenty of time still to go in the first half. The Eagles pressured Mahomes on 50% of his dropbacks, despite not truly blitzing one time in the game. All of that pressure with just 4 pass rushers. Just a harmonious, a beautiful performance from Vic Fangio's defense. Maybe the crowning performance of Vic Fangio's storied career, which, if you know anything about the guy and the decades that he's spent in the NFL, says quite a lot. We'll even throw in the special teams game. No misses in this Eagles performance. Jake Elliott, who was a liability at times this season, maybe not a guy Eagles fans trusted completely. 4 of 4 field goals, 4 of 4 extra points, a perfect 8 of 8 kicking on the day. No bad days on this Eagles team at exactly the right time. We're going to get into all of this and more. We got 2 embedded reporters joining us later on in the show to talk about the performance in this game specifically. But before we do that, I think it feels important to think of what the Eagles just did in a fuller context, because It sounds crazy to say. This is an Eagles team that at one point looked like it was capable of the run that we've seen from the Kansas City Chiefs. They were good enough to be the 1 seed in the NFC in 2022. They lose that Super Bowl to Kansas City by a field goal at the end of the game. They come back the next year. They respond with a 10 vibes in Philly seemed that bad. What went unnoticed by way too many people was that Philadelphia responded to that collapse by completely remaking themselves. Big piece of the failures of 2023 was bad decisions in coaches by Nick Sirianni. He replaced 2 fantastic coordinators with 2 hires that were in over their heads, dressed that decision fantastically in 2024. He brings on 2 of the most qualified coaches that were available last year. Fangio at defensive coordinator, Kellen Moore at offensive coordinator. Needless to say, those 2 hires paid dividends all season long and in the biggest game of the year. They turned to free agency. They turned to the draft. They got aggressive, as general manager Howie Roseman loves to do. And the story of this Eagles season is that virtually every single one of those decisions cashed in. Fangio and Moore speak for themselves. Saquon Barkley, the marquee free agent addition from the rival New York Giants, literally set records in his first season. The first and second round draft picks, Quinyon Mitchell and DeJean, were difference makers basically from the word go. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, key piece of that first Super Bowl team, goes to Detroit for a year, comes back, gets 6 interceptions for this feisty Eagles defense. Mekhi Becton, washed out of New York as a highly touted left tackle, plugs in at guard as a training camp whim, something Nick Sirianni and Jeff Stoutland noticed during the course of OTAs, actually, I believe it was. Plug him in at guard where he is a star. Maybe the most surprising example of this at all, Bond, who signs on from the New Orleans Saints as a special teams afterthought, gets moved to inside linebacker by Fangio, becomes an all-pro and a defensive player of the year candidate, and helps the Eagles lock up a championship in the stadium where he used to be a special teams guy. You add that many game changers to a team that was already good enough to win 11 games last year and lose a Super Bowl the year before. Maybe this shouldn't have been a surprise. Clearly it was, because so many people, yours truly included, picked the Kansas City Chiefs to win this game. But maybe it shouldn't have been. An all-time heater of aggressive decisions, gambles that paid off in a big, big way. Wasn't without its setbacks, wasn't without its drama. There's always bound to be at least a little bit of drama in Philadelphia. But the Eagles have been one of the best teams, one of the most impressive rosters in football for the last 3 years at minimum. And now they have another shiny trophy to add to their case to prove it. All right, let's take it down from the booth to the field with another